We would love to get started, and I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We gratefully acknowledge the Indigenous people of the lands we are on today. Even though we're meeting in a virtual space, it is important for us to recognize that we have and continue to benefit from the theft and occupation of this land since even before the United States was formed as a nation. Global Rights for Women is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with staff throughout Minnesota, and acknowledges we are on Dakota, Anishinaabe, and Ojibwe land. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence that have been inflicted upon Indigenous people globally. Additionally, we understand the treatment of Indigenous women is a byproduct of colonialism, racism, and misogyny that has perpetuated the continued sexual abuse, disappearance, and murder of Indigenous women here in Minnesota and in many places around the world. So please join us now in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harm of the past and the present, and to consider how you can join the effort to dismantle the continued oppression of Indigenous communities and restore justice. Also, since people are joining here from around the world at this time, if you would like to put into the chat the land that you are acknowledging, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to Global Rights for Women's Conversation Series, Valiant Voices. I am Patricia Cumbie, pronouns she, her, and will be today's moderator. I am the communications manager for Global Rights for Women, and I am also the author of a rape recovery memoir called The Shape of 100 Hips. And Valiant Voices is a conversation series created by Global Rights for Women that features human rights advocates and survivors addressing injustice and disrupting oppressive systems that cause harm. These are the stories of powerful leaders creating change in their communities and around the world. And we're very honored to have Sarah Super and Lori Greene joining us today, and I will introduce them more fully in a moment. I would like to thank you all so much for being here. This is our inaugural Valiant Voices conversation, and we're very excited because we are also recognizing that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and this conversation is part of our work to also contribute to the conversation and raise awareness. I'd also like to share with you a few announcements of future conversations that we're going to have on Thursday, April 29th. We will be addressing misrepresentation, LGBTQ narratives, sparking change, and we will be joined in that conversation by legal advocate Jess Braverman and advocacy director Erin May Quaid from Gender Justice. And we will also be joined with Andrea Jenkins, who has made history as the first African-American openly trans woman to be elected to office in the United States. And these are leading voices of LGBTQ liberation, and you won't want to miss their stories of courage and resilience. So we hope you'll join us for that. And then on Tuesday, May 18th, we will be in conversation with Rosario de la Torre from Casa de Esperanza. She's a legal advocate, and Comfort Dando, who founded the Fumulani shelter for African immigrant women. And we will be talking about serving immigrant survivors of intimate partner violence and their innovations in doing that. And we will also have a guest moderator for that, Vanessa Diaz, who is a fellow with the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. So we're very honored by that. And in case you're unfamiliar with the work of Global Rights for Women, I thought I would share some information with you about that as well. Global Rights for Women, we work with partners around the world, and we support the work of advocates who are doing important work, centering survivor voices as the means for achieving systemic change in the world. And I'd like to share that we feel our vision will be realized when survivors of violence are acknowledged and believed, that perpetrators are held accountable, and communities no longer accept violence against women and girls. We are live streaming on Facebook today and welcome your comments there or in the chat here on Zoom. And after the conversation, we will be sending out a link with the recording. So now I would like to introduce to you our amazing guests. And after I share some of that bio info, I would also like to share with you today a video of the memorial, just in case you haven't had the opportunity to see it or you're from somewhere where you can't get here to see it. So it's such a powerful thing. I'm looking forward to sharing with you. So excited to introduce you both. So Sarah Super, she, her, is a rape survivor, educator, and activist. She founded Break the Silence to create more invitations and platforms for survivors of sexual violence to organize for social change and publicly speak their truth. Her professional background includes facilitating racial justice dialogues, teaching trauma-sensitive yoga, and training organizations in trauma-informed practices. Sarah earned her bachelor's degrees in sociology and American studies, and a master's in human resource development from the University of Minnesota. Welcome, Sarah. And mosaic artist and sculptor Lori Greene, she, her, identifies as a community and public artist. Lori is well known for creating pieces about healing and recovering from trauma. As a multiracial African-American, Native American, Mississippi Band of Choctaw, and Caucasian woman, Lori brings a unique voice and perspective to public art that has not always been represented. Her identity as a woman of color is very visible in her work, as demonstrated through the narratives of her pieces and the people who are represented in them. Lori's work is bold, colorful, and unapologetic. Through Lori's artistic process, she works to honor the legacies of BIPOC people and decolonize our relationship to Mother Nature. Made with love, her works serve as prayers for a future of justice, perseverance, and intergenerational healing. Welcome, Lori. And at this time, I would like to share my screen and show you the video.
We dedicate this memorial to victims, to survivors, to people who have experienced sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual exploitation, and rape.
We dedicate this memorial to those who face sexual violence at the highest rates: Indigenous women, Black women, women of color, queer and trans folks, sex workers, undocumented immigrants, people who are incarcerated, people experiencing homelessness, people with disabilities, children, and young people.
We dedicate this memorial to those who have endured sexual violence as a means of colonization, slavery, social oppression, and as a weapon of war.
We dedicate this memorial to those who were not believed, to those who were silenced by being shamed, blamed, or punished for what happened to them, to those who watched as the people around them ignored the abuse or defended the perpetrator.
We dedicate this memorial to people who feel forever changed by this experience, to those who lost a part of themselves or the life they could have led, to those who faced enduring trauma and mental and physical illnesses in the aftermath.
We dedicate this memorial to people who found themselves alone and isolated at a time when they desperately needed support and allies, to people who are abandoned by friends, family, and their community in the aftermath of sexual violence.
We dedicate this memorial to those who reported their experiences and saw the system fail them, to those whose experiences weren't taken seriously, to those whose rape kits sat on shelves untested or were destroyed, to those whose cases weren't investigated because of an arbitrary statute of limitations.
We dedicate this memorial to people who didn't feel safe to report their experiences, to those who knew the system would cause further harm to them or their community, and to all those whose perpetrators never faced any consequences or were never held accountable.
We dedicate this memorial to those who hold these traumatic experiences in silence, to those who have carried this suffering alone. We dedicate this memorial to the silence breakers, to those who have courageously spoken their truth aloud.
This place is yours, is ours. This place is for all of us. May we find peace and healing here together in solidarity.
Wow. I've seen that video quite a few times now, and I'm always so moved to see it. And what an amazing thing for our community. So I'd like to start with a question to you, Sarah. You know, the Survivors Memorial is just, it's huge. It's such a huge undertaking. And when I think about healing, for example, you know, I know a lot of survivors like myself, we get therapy, we do some kind of movement, you know, dance, yoga, etc. Writing, I wrote a book, you know, and all these things are great, really wonderful. But I think about this memorial and just undertaking a legacy project like this, something that impacts the whole community, the city, and beyond. That is grand and bold. So talk about why doing a memorial like this is so important. And I should note that it's the first permanent memorial to sexual assault survivors in the United States. It's huge.
Yeah, thank you. I did launch this project about 6 weeks after I was raped. So this was very much born out of a time and place in my life of a lot of suffering. I guess also part of that I have to acknowledge is that, you know, before I was raped, I had studied social justice. I had studied social movements. I had my master's in education and focusing on adult learning. And I had also had the privilege of, in my work, studying particularly the intersections of racial justice and the body through like mind-body modalities, yoga particularly. I had come to study psychological trauma. And I think the combination of that experience, that education for me, that I had gained before this personal trauma, that was very much a part of what shaped, I think, my healing journey and what I needed and required from the people and the communities and the systems around me. I guess, you know, why was this important to me at that moment that I started it? I think something that I've seen over and over and over again in the last 6 years since I've been raped has been the myth of how victim survivors heal. And I think at a very fundamental level, the idea of healing for victims of sexual violence in a rape culture is seen as individualized and private. And I think this lives out in phrases such as, I hope you're taking care of yourself, or I hope you're getting the support you need, which in other ways is a way of like people washing their hands of the responsibility that they are part of the healing and the resolution of this traumatic thing for the survivors in their lives and in their communities. I think for me, I not only, it was unique that I was, that my perpetrator was arrested that night. It was not unique to see a community rally around that person and their family as if they were the victims. And then the real victim becomes this invisible pseudonym. I needed people to care because this just doesn't go away in private, with therapy or bubble baths like this. We would never address racism by telling people of color in this country to talk to a therapist and take a bubble bath. We have somehow fortunately come to the awareness that in order to heal from human rights abuses, there needs to be a societal response, a systems response at every level, in every company, in every nonprofit. It, flows through every way in which people interact with each other, both as individuals and as groups and as organizations and so on. We have not yet come to that realization, I think, in a rape culture. We have not yet fully recognized sexual violence as a human rights abuse. And if we did, we would be looking at the response and the need to change responses, not just on these individual or private levels, and not just on the systems level, not just in the way the legal system responds, but especially in the way that our friends and our family and our religious communities and our school communities and our offices, that those respond as well. And so this memorial was an idea that was planted in my brain by Dr. Judith Herman in her book, Trauma and Recovery, in which she compares the experience of healing from sexual and domestic violence to the experience of healing from serving in a war or witnessing violence. And she talks about how veterans, though they certainly don't get all the support they deserve and need, the outcomes do look different. And we can even see it differently for different wars, right? The response that the US gave World War II veterans is very different than the response overall that the US gave Vietnam veterans. And so we can see how those outcomes, those responses from the society, from the communities that surrounded them, had an outcome in what their healing journeys might look like. And of course, one of those examples is the, honoring of the truth of being told through the use of memorial, and taking up public space and having one's truth kind of claimed in that way. And so I recognized the lack of that space. She recognized first and foremost in 1994 the lack of monuments and memorials to victims of sexual violence. And sure enough, in 2015, that gap still existed. So I thought I'd take it on.
Wow, huge, just huge. As you're talking, I was thinking about, in part, the work of Global Rights for Women, is to have systems change in enacting policies and laws around the world. And, central to that is that, survivors are seen, heard, and believed. And that's one reason why I think this memorial is such an amazing contribution to our world. And also, the work of advocacy for women's human right to be free from violence. And I'm really glad you said that as a human right. And it can be difficult for it to be visible for people because the number one place that this occurs is in the home. So it's not a public space. And I feel like one of the things this memorial does is make the violence visible and lifts up so many. And I just imagine that it's generated countless conversations that I expect are rippling out toward greater understanding. So what an amazing accomplishment. And thank you for sharing your story with us. So Lori, oh my gosh, this is just the most beautifully done memorial. It's colorful, inclusive, it demonstrates gravitas as well as hope and healing. And, when you come into contact with it, you just can't help but feel seen and uplifted. So my question to you is, what do you think about the role of art in the healing process, and what does it mean to, make a monument like this?
Thank you. Well, for me personally, as a survivor, art was what saved me. Art in nature, and so I think I've been trying to make this piece for about 30 years, and it wasn't until I got the email from Sarah inviting me to participate that I actually was able to dream that into existence. And I, for one, I don't know about Sarah, but I did not know what we were getting into, how big
What
this
were
was
you
going to
getting
be.
into?
We were just going to make a bench. There were a lot of people that helped us realize how big and important this was. It's really an honor to be part of it. It's constantly healing myself, and yeah, I'm kind of flummoxed as to now what do I do after spending most of my life wanting to do something that would make a difference towards healing women and men. And yeah.
Well, it's an amazing legacy that you're leaving here for so many, and based on what I've seen of your work, I'm sure it's not the last. And certainly my dream for you is, global commissions doing things like this. So that is my hope and desire just in general with this memorial. And I know that there are other efforts now underway, and that's just another part of that ripple effect that's happening around this memorial out there in the world. And one of the things that we do at Global Rights for Women is we help communities develop what we call a coordinated community response to violence. And essentially what that means is that, all areas of the system are, talking to each other and responding in a trauma-informed way to survivors. And, art has not been formally included as part of a coordinated community response, but I believe art plays an important role, not just for the individual survivor, but for the community as a whole, where it's, offering up space to reflect and heal, but also to speak truth, like Sarah said earlier. And, we've seen that with the outpouring of art for George Floyd, for example. And, one of the first responses to his death was a mural. And when I think about this piece of amazing artistry, it's such a gift to our world. And in your bio, you say you offer it as a true prayer for justice, and I really see it that way. So thank you for that. So I know that part of this project's intention was to create something that people could also interact with. So I'm wondering if you could share a story or two that resonates with you about how people have reacted to the memorial.
I had an experience recently where I received an email from someone that I had only just met via Zoom, actually. and they asked me if I would be willing to participate in a family gathering. One of her family members was a survivor, and asked if I would meet them down at the memorial and just talk about what the process was like in the building of the memorial and some of the meaning hidden in the pieces. And it was really an honor, really emotional. I am not a big talker, so I am, my work is with my hands. But to have that experience with the family and to listen to what they were seeing and what they felt in the memorial really was an amazing honor for me. I don't like to give away too much of, my little secret codes that I put in things, because I don't want to color people's view. I want them to have their own experience with the memorial or whatever piece of art. Although I'm glad to share if they really want to know as well. But that was really incredible. And it kind of wiped me out for a few days, just spending that time with them.
Wow, that sounds like a really amazing and important conversation. And I imagine this memorial is just sparking so many of those amongst family members in particular, even just probably opening the door to saying so. I think it's so important. So Sarah, what's resonated with you, how people have interacted with the memorial?
Well, I live close to the memorial by coincidence. So I get to experience, I walk my dog through Boom Island Park almost every day, and I get to see people interact with it. It's really, really special just to get that kind of everyday, like, here it is, and it's almost like when it was completed and we like quickly celebrated it as it, should have been. But now it's like, okay, when we said permanent, we truly meant like, here it is every day. And every day people go through it and every day people see it. And so I get to see people walk up to it, whether it's planned or happenstance that they pass by and are interested. It kind of draws you in, the mosaics, particularly the lights. And, I see people taking photos of it, and you just wonder, who are they sending this photo to? Who are they sharing this with? I'd also say that one of the concerns that I had, especially as, we launched this project years before #MeToo went viral. And when that hashtag did go viral, not only did we see the progress, we saw the backwards push of all these people, like, hating the women, namely, who came forward, and like the witch hunt, as Donald Trump called it, over and over again, of, what was seen as something that was vicious. And during that, seeing that, I was getting ready for the pushback of this memorial, that, every time we do something forward, there's always going to be people who push us back, or at least attempt. And Lori reassured me that her work has never been vandalized, which, knock on wood, never happened. But I was ready for it. I was emotionally trying to prepare myself for, we spent 5 years creating something that someone could desecrate overnight. And I think what's so remarkable for me is, I see this memorial every day. It has never been desecrated in that way. In fact, on these beautiful spring warm weather weekends we've been having, there's hundreds of people sitting and enjoying Boom Island Park. Tons of people are like drinking beers and smoking weed, doing their thing, having fun. And no one is using the memorial as the site for their party. No one is using the memorial as just like their picnic spot. People are keeping the memorial as a sacred space. And it's really beautiful to see that. And not only has it been used in a way that's so sacred, but people who are visiting sometimes make it even more sacred. And I've seen flowers left there. I've seen like a painted rock left there. Someone brought chalk. Like everyone's mindful of the environment too, right? Like we're not, whatever you leave there, like might just go right into the river. But someone used like sidewalk chalk to write these supportive messages to survivors. And yeah, it's really been beautiful that way to see just kind of a daily interaction with this place, and to know now that like that's going to continue to happen for hopefully decades.
Wow. So Lori, you must have put some really powerful force field around that memorial for it to be so respected and revered.
The site itself, it felt sacred before we put the mosaics up. It really had this incredible energy to it. I think it was the intention of all of us that worked on it, that we put so much love and care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearly the intention is radiating out in a very vibrant and beautiful way. So we're actually starting to come to the end of our time together, which has gone really fast. And I thought I would check with Nazifa to see if there were any comments or questions people might have about the memorial.
Hi, everyone. So there aren't any questions as of yet, but if anybody has a question, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll share it with the panelists and they can answer any questions or comments that you guys have.
Yeah, so while we wait, or, people may be thinking, I have a question for Sarah. Since you do live so close and you can see the memorial on a very consistent basis, do you feel like it changes at all in the seasons? What do you feel like? What's your relationship to it?
I mean, I actually feel like this is a better question for Lori, because my first reaction is the mosaics, there's a pattern, there's seasons in the mosaics, and I'd love Lori to talk about that.
Yeah, there are seasons. I didn't even realize how seasonal they were until we laid them all out together. But we actually built them during each season. So this first one started in the winter and we ended in the fall, and yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing how it worked out that way, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing was kind of amazing that it worked out so well.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like we're getting some questions. What do you have there?
Yeah, there's a common thread between a few of them. People are wondering, are there other memorials going up in other cities? Do you guys know of any other memorials?
Yes, this project has inspired some other memorials. There is one in, oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now on the town. I know my mom is watching Mary Super. You must know, like, what is the city in Wisconsin? There was a young woman who saw us in our planning stages, a survivor who was inspired by what we were doing before construction even started. And it set her in motion to launch this project in her city in Wisconsin. And sure enough, she has gotten, I think they don't have a separate park board and city council, but she has gotten the approvals that she needs. And she's currently fundraising for her project. And I think you can find that online, the Survivors Monument. I will send Pat the link. So if people are interested in helping this movement of memorials grow, we can certainly do that. There is a memorial that's being built in Budapest, Hungary, honoring victims of rape, particularly those who were sexually violated during war, which is really the focal point of that memorial. And then most recently, and most exciting in a way, is what I think could spark a global revolution for a lot of these religious institutions where sexual abuse has run rampant and has often been met with no accountability by the perpetrators or the people who stood by passively, letting them continue to act violently. And that is that the one of the survivors who came to our memorial in Minneapolis had been one of those victims of sexual abuse as a young person, and decades later comes to this memorial in Minneapolis and really feels seen. And he contacts the Lutheran parish where his assault abuse happened. And it sets into motion the ELCA of the US, I think, of like Northwestern Minnesota. The Northwestern Minnesota Synod has taken on this as something they're committed to doing, and something that's replicable at all of their churches. So we are looking at dozens of physical symbols of solidarity with victims of the sexual abuse that happened within that church system, that religious organization. And I hope it ripples outward, because I grew up Catholic and I have never seen the Catholic Church take any action to do something that requires people who step across the threshold of a church to remember also what the church is,
Wow.
the violence the church has committed.
That is an amazing story, and really a testament to what this memorial, the power of this memorial, I think. So I think we have time for perhaps one more question.
Yeah, I see a question. So, has there been any media coverage of the memorial?
I can answer that. Sarah can too. Yes.
There was, honestly, I was expecting a lot more. However, we were in the midst of a pandemic when this was completed. We were in the midst of a presidential election, and this was completed in end of September, early October. So you can imagine what we were focusing on. And Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had just passed away. So there was a lot happening in the world. And we had just like some local coverage.
Well, thank you very much for answering those questions, and just both of you, Lori and Sarah, for honoring us with your presence and sharing your survivor stories, as well as the incredibly impactful work that you have done with this memorial, and I think will continue to ripple on outward. So I'd like to thank you as our guests today, and thank our participants who have come and listened to this conversation today. I would also like to thank my colleague, Nazifa Wazirzada, for ensuring this conversation went smoothly and for giving Valiant Voices its name. So we will be sharing this recording and including all of the links to things that we've talked about, so you can go ahead and launch some of your own research and keep in touch with us in the meanwhile. And I would just like to thank everyone for being here. Have a great day.